To continue with your question, just at the very end, Cecilia?
Yeah.
Sorry.
To just complete your question before I take the next question. So, of course, there's the idea of, if I, for instance, am a student of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he tells me not to engage in this particular practice, and instead I do so, and having received empowerments from His Holiness, I'm breaking my samaya with His Holiness, my practice pledge that I've given to His Holiness. That would be a problem. So I would pollute myself, but other people would be polluted by my own breaking of the, that's what Calvin and, what's your name again? Priscilla. So Priscilla and Calvin, or Priscilla basically pointed it out to me. She showed me this quote of someone breaking their commitment to their guru, and they were negatively affected. But if I do that, then I affect myself negatively, and I cannot pollute others unless they allow themselves to also act in that way. And one last thing, I'm not saying we should hang out with people who follow this, because I could be negatively influenced. We are sometimes told, avoid harmful friends. Even in the Vinaya, it says, do not hang out with people who were previously ordained. Now, this needs to be... wait. This needs to be explained, because it sounds very cruel. It depends on your motivation. If hanging out with them causes you to also disrobe, because, somehow you feel, oh, how nice, they live a layperson's life, I also want to become a layperson. That is when you shouldn't. But honestly, I have friends who were ordained and are no longer ordained, and to me they're still Sangha, because they know what it was like to be a nun. They've at least done it for some time. And there's nothing that can do for me to disrobe. So I would always spend time with them, because I know they cannot negatively influence me. Besides, they wouldn't do that at all. They would never do that. So it needs to be interpreted. If it influences me negatively in my practice, then better to stay away. But I'm not talking about even going to their centers, receiving their teachings, but rather to have respect. To have respect and not be resentful. That's the main point. Okay, great. And then Valerie, did you just raise your hand? No. Calvin is actually, sorry. First, yeah.
It was the same question with Cecilia that I have.
Okay, it was the same question. So has it been answered?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is there further questions?
The example you gave about the absence when you open the closet and the absence that there's no ghost.
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand, because the context was like, I'm afraid of the ghost in the closet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I open the closet and say, like the mind knows that there's no ghost.
Yeah.
But for myself, number one, I don't know how the ghost look like, so it's more like feeling of a ghost. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I have an image of the ghost.
Mm-hmm.
So how will I know when I open the closet? Because my eye will have seen nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So how will I get the feeling that there's no ghost? Because the fear will be still...
Okay. I give you another example. Forget about the ghost. A snake. A poisonous snake in your closet. So there are no invisible snakes we have to be afraid of, right? It's really like actual snakes. So with regard to the snake, well, for instance, I think it's in the entry of the middle way. I seem to remember it's in the entry of the middle way. Yes, it is in the entry of the middle way. My Lancia actually just learned, I shouldn't just say Chandakirti, I should say Acharya Chandakirti. Because I was told that Geshe Kelsang always says, he's not your classmate. He's right. I learned my lesson. Thank you, Geshe. Yes, you're right. He's right. So, yes, as Geshe Kelsang says, Acharya Chandakirti, He says in his entry into the middle way, if you have a snake in the house and someone tells you there's no elephant in the house, it's not going to take care of your fear, right? So we have to deal with the snake directly. So the snake is a good example. So if someone says there's a snake in your bedroom or in your closet, it's scary enough, just in your closet. So if you have that fear, of course, if someone says, "Oh, don't worry, there's no elephant in your closet," you're like, "So what? You were scared of that." And how can you find out whether it's there or not? Well, you can take a sleeping pill and hope you sleep through the night, but that's not going to take care of the problem. So usually we may try to overcome our anger temporarily, and that's good. It's better than letting it run wild, but it won't take care of it in the long term. So we need to engage in this searching for what appears to our mind, in the same way as we would search for the snake. So if that's example, does that work better? Or can you adjust your question to the new analogy I'm using with the snake?
Because I think the context was you're trying to explain the mind can see absence, can cognize absence.
Mm-hmm.
So the homework was to find the self, right?
Yes.
So the mind can cognize the absence of a self.
Absolutely.
But the self isn't my...
Sorry, not the absence of a self, the absence of an inherently existent self.
So my mind, I interpreted the I as it's not like physical.
Mm-hmm.
So the snake is physical.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy, inverted comma, easy to look for to see the snake and know that there's absence of a snake.
It's easier, you're right. Examples are usually used because they're easier.
So the ghost, actually, because I couldn't have an image of the ghost. So actually, I understand the part when you say the mind can cognize absence of the ghost.
Yes.
But my question is, if I don't have an image of the ghost, then how will the mind say, like, there's no ghost?
Yes, that's why we say in the beginning it's so important to identify the object of negation. It's so true what you're saying. That's the main problem. We talked about it a little bit. Unfortunately, we couldn't spend much more time on it because there was a lot to cover. But you're right. I mean, this should not be the last time when we went through it. You should go through it again in terms of there's so many explanations on the true truth. There are 2 books by Guy Newland, a shorter one and a larger one. So you could read this, for instance, in particular on the object of negation. What is it exactly we're saying doesn't exist, so that we don't negate too little and don't negate too much? There are also Geshe Kelsang, he wrote an excellent book on the true truth. So first you should read Geshe Kelsang's book, The True Truth. And basically if you Google the true truth, most books on the true truth are called the true truth, so it's pretty easy. Then there's this book by Guy Newland. But I would read Geshe Kelsang's first because he's such an amazing master. Basically, so you have that. You have, of course, in the Illumination of the Intent by Lama Tsongkhapa, you have a whole chapter on the true truth, which is not different from what you learn in the books that are specifically on the true truth. Yeah, so in that way, there's a lot of material and focus in particular on the explanations on the object of negation. And once that becomes clear, then you start to analyze, does it exist or not? So it's very important, I'm glad you bring it up, to make sure that you know what to negate. That's most important before you start negating, of course, yeah. So yes, I see what you're saying, but just as the snake is kind of, it's just as the ghost is kind of hazy, the self is kind of hazy, so in that way there's similar. Okay, yeah, I get it. More questions?
The question is,
if you tap it, yeah, it's on. Mm-hmm. No? Yeah.
My question is, what is the subtle 12 links of dependence?
What is the subtle?
Subtle 12 links of dependent orientations. 12 links.
Chocolate?
12 links.
Sorry. Sorry. What is the subtle 12 links of dependent arising? The subtle. Okay. I mean, it depends. Subtle from the point of view of cognitive obstructions. Is how, I don't know, maybe Geshe Kelsang he talks about it. Is this from, no? What are the coarse 12 links? Yeah, if you ask me for the subtle 12 links, implied by your question is that there are coarse 12 links. What are the coarse 12 links? Because it depends on that. I hope I understand what you mean with subtle, because there are different ways. So what are the coarse 12 links? What are you thinking of? What are the coarse 12 links?
One thing is ignorance.
Inherence? Ignorance.
Yeah.
The 12 links. So that's the first link.
Yeah, the first link that you forget all the rest of the links. I mean, yeah.
So you're saying ignorance is the coarse, but you're talking about coarse 12 links. That's just one link. Ignorance is just one link. You asked me about the subtle 12 links. So if there are 12 subtle links, my question is, are there 12 coarse links as well?
Yeah, that's my question.
Okay. Now, I mean, the only way I could think of here in this context is the 12 links from the point of view of liberation, from the point of view of the fundamental vehicle, and from the point of view of the universal vehicle. Okay, so usually, even with the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links are just an extensive version of the Four Noble Truths, right? There's 12 links in the forward version, the reverse version, and so forth. So, in that sense, yes, they're just an extensive version, as I said, of the Four Noble Truths. Now, to start with the Four Noble Truths, a coarse version, if you like, it's coarser than the other version, which is the subtler one, is the version from the point of view of the fundamental vehicle. And then there is the version from the point of view of the universal vehicle, the Mahayana. Now, from the point of view of the fundamental vehicle, it's the usual Four Noble Truths. So first you have the suffering of samsara, which includes the 3 types of suffering, which includes the 6 types of suffering, which includes the 4 types, the different types explained in the Lamrim, in the Great Lamrim, or in the text on the stages of the path to enlightenment. So, samsara suffering. And what are the causes? Well, ignorance, of course, and then the other mental afflictions, plus the contaminated karmic actions that these afflictions give rise to. That's the truth of the origin. And then you have the cessation, the fact you can overcome the rude misperception or misconception, and therefore everything else. And how can you do it? By way of the path. That's the usual Four Noble Truths from the point of view, basically, the perspective of the fundamental vehicle, which discusses liberation. Here the cessation is liberation. Liberation from samsara. But you can attain liberation from samsara without being fully enlightened. That's important. There's, of course, a difference. First, you eliminate the mental afflictions, including the misconception, or mainly the misconception of reality. And when you remove that, together with the potential for that to arise in your mental continuum again, you automatically also eliminate the other mental afflictions. And that is described, that's the mind of a person who has eliminated these obstructions is called a liberated mind. And this person has attained liberation. But now you still have something left. There's still something in your mental continuum. Which are the cognitive obscurations. The cognitive obscurations are still left. Now you can apply the Four Noble Truths also from the perspective of the cognitive obscurations, or from the point of view of the universal vehicle, and they're subtler. What is the truth of suffering? It's the absence of omniscience. The absence of omniscience. That's a suffering, that's a limitation. You're still limited. And you don't suffer any longer, but you're not omniscient. For a bodhisattva, that's a kind of suffering that can't be of benefit to all sentient beings. What is the root cause? It's the imprints. So what is the origin of suffering? It's the imprints left by the ignorance. So even though I no longer have ignorance, I still have the imprints. These keep me from being of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. And as I said, for a bodhisattva, that's a suffering. I mean, not a suffering in the conventional sense, but a limitation that hinders them, that prevents them from being of the greatest benefit to all sentient beings. So the truth of suffering from the perspective of the Mahayana is the not being omniscient, not being able to guide sentient beings, therefore, in the most effective way. The cause of that is the imprints that are still left. The cessation, of course, would be the cessation of these imprints. In other words, the cessation of the cognitive obscurations. So the origin of suffering could also be described as the cognitive obscurations, the imprints. Cessation is the absence of these in the state of a Buddhahood, when you attain the state of a Buddha. Now, what is the truth of the path? It is the meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness after you've eliminated the afflictive obscurations. So actually, in the continuum of a bodhisattva who has at least reached the 8th ground, 8th, 9th, or 10th ground, those are the path. Because these consciousnesses now, because of bodhicitta, have become so strong, these minds realizing emptiness directly, I compare them to vacuum cleaners. Remember? I said they're like vacuum cleaners that eliminate the obscurations. And with these you have the modern vacuum cleaners who you can adjust, like you put up the strength. So initially they suck in a little bit, but for the subtler, if you have like a woolen kind of carpet with long kind of woolen threads, you really want to go deep inside. Like I come from Germany, it's cold, so you have these hairy kind of carpets, woolen carpets, and any kind of crumbs, they go right, in the middle of it. So when you have if the volume or the intensity of the vacuum cleaner is low, okay, whatever's on the surface, you suck that up. But to go deeper into the fabric of this carpet, you need to put up the intensity. So that's like deeper in our mind, the imprints. They are much deeper, they're harder to remove. So it's through bodhicitta that our vacuum cleaner, the meditative equipoise, gets strengthened. It gets more powerful, so that it sucks out now even the imprints. Everything else is gone. Now the subtlest kind of obscuration needs to be sucked out. That is the truth of the path. These particular types of meditative equipoise, which through bodhicitta are so far enhanced that they can gradually eliminate different levels of imprints. There are also coarser ones and subtler ones. So they are slowly removed. And once they're all removed, so that's the truth of the path from the perspective of the Mahayana, or from the perspective of the universal vehicle. And the cessation, of course, is their complete elimination. So in that way, you have the subtle Four Noble Truth. You have the subtle Four Noble Truth. Now you can apply the same to the 12 links, right? For instance, ignorance. It's not literally ignorance, but it's the imprints, like ignorance in the sense of leaving imprints, right? So this is a little bit more tricky. Okay, so you leave imprints, then you have consciousness. So of course you're not reborn in the same way, but what's interesting a bodhisattva on that level still is reborn. They're no longer reborn in samsara, but they're repeatedly take birth. It's not through karma and afflictions, but through the imprints and prayers, and pure prayers. So they make prayers to come back, so they're able with the body to practice, because you need a body to practice generosity and all the other practices. It's good to have a body. Therefore, they take on what is called a mental body. However, the causes here are the imprints help you. In this case, the imprints help you, and a pure kind of motivation to be reborn again, to take birth. So that is left. That is left on the mental continuum. Then you live in this life, and at the end of the life, what triggers it? So it's a feeling, craving, grasping. No, they're slightly different. So it's compassion. Here you're reborn through prayers and compassion. So it would be compassion that triggers these. So that then in the next life, you're reborn as a bodhisattva and continue your practice. So these are settler 12 links. I mean, it's a little bit differently explained, needs to be adjusted accordingly, but you're still going through different causes and conditions that enable you to take birth again, and you're also mortal in that existence. I mean, you will not always continue in that existence, but of course it's much higher, harder to understand, and therefore subtler. Does that answer your question? Or have I confused you more?
So my clarification is that, so this 12 links is still dependent on cause and conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So are they also dependent by the other two?
They're dependent on what?
Because there's three types of dependent arising, right?
3 types of dependent arising, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
so is this 12 links also dependent on the other two?
Singapore. Gee. Wow. Sorry, I'm really distracted. Pity gave me this incredible Singapore tea, so I'm sorry. Okay, yes, so they're still dependent. Even the Buddha is dependent on the 3 types. It's still within the context. So a Buddha is not beyond the 3 types of dependence, by the way. So not just a bodhisattva, but even a Buddha. That's an important question. A Buddha is still cannot go beyond causes and conditions. A Buddha is still operates within these 3. So a bodhisattva anyway, but a Buddha too. So if we don't have the karma, if we have the karma to die, and don't have the karma for anyone to rescue us, not even the Buddha can rescue us. No one can do anything. Even the Buddha is powerless. What is stronger than a Buddha? Our karma. Once it has ripened, that is, once there's no way you can do anything. Well, first of all, it has ripened already, so then you can't purify it, or there's no other karma that could actually counteract that negative karma. If nothing can be, I mean, I don't even know exactly how it works, but anyway, we can't be helped. Sometimes we have a karma to be helped, or sometimes a karma has not ripened yet. It can be, someone can help us to purify it before it ripens. And sometimes that's not the case. So even the Buddha depends on causes and conditions, operates within the sphere of causes and conditions. A Buddha is still dependent on, I don't even want to say his parts, because it's really like his, her, or beyond their parts, right? A Buddha is still dependent on parts, and they're still labeling. I mean, it's still true that phenomena are merely labeled, even for a Buddha. Even if the Buddha doesn't label, but still a Buddha functions within, these 3 levels of dependent arising. Yeah, important question. Yeah. More questions?
Geshe, you brought up this issue of it's the power of the bodhicitta that the bodhisattva has on the 8th to the 10th ground, right? That makes them capable of eliminating the obstructions to omniscience. So my question is this: we know that there is contrived bodhicitta,
Yes.
yeah, and then there's uncontrived bodhicitta, which is what we have when we are on the 5 paths. Correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So, my question is, in terms of practicing the Vajrayana path, is there another even higher category of bodhicitta?
Okay. Yes, so as Cecilia is saying, she's absolutely right. Before you enter the Mahayana path, if you engage in the practice of bodhicitta, as long as it's contrived, as you have to make an effort and it's not spontaneous, you're not on the Mahayana path from a sutric point of view. And then once you have uncontrived bodhicitta, so spontaneous bodhicitta, I'm just explaining it for the context. So to create a context. So the thing is, so once you have the spontaneous bodhicitta, you don't have to make an effort. It pops up any time, and your actions are always informed by your aspiration to become enlightened. Then you've entered the path. And we've just heard, even then, there's room for improvement. In fact, it has to be still strengthened. It can be strengthened. And then, so this is just from the point of view of the sutric path. But in Tantra, since it's so much faster, it is said that bodhicitta has to be even more powerful. Because now you're engaging in a difficult path, a fast path, but a very challenging path. It is very, very difficult. I mean, once your mind is ready for it, of course, it's less difficult than for someone like us. But the point is, it's still, because, it's like, what's easier, to drive a bicycle or to fly a supersonic jet? Duh, right? A bicycle is so slow, even if you fall down, it's not the end of the world. But a supersonic jet, I mean, you need to be able to fly it. It takes a lot of expertise. Your ability needs to be so much greater than of someone who cycles a bicycle or rides a bicycle. So therefore, similar here, the tantric path is so much faster, so much more powerful, but when you go the wrong way, you can hurt yourself much more than you can on the sutric path, which is why your determination needs to be stronger. Your determination in terms of bodhicitta, because you're working with your afflictions. If you utilize, for instance, desire into the path, or just this idea of divine pride, we have a lot of non-divine pride. We have a lot of ordinary arrogance and so forth. So to mistake the two, thinking I have divine pride, but actually increase your self-centeredness, that's huge. Therefore, you have to be ready. And if your bodhicitta is strong enough, then that self-centeredness can't come through. Because really, non-divine or afflicted pride is very much moved or very much motivated by self-centeredness. And what is the best antidote to self-centeredness? It is bodhicitta. Which is why it makes sense. It's important to have very strong bodhicitta, very strong aspiration and determination to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. Be so focused and so determined that none of the downfalls affect you when it comes to tantric practice. I mean, seeing the Guru as Buddha, that is difficult because we have an ordinary appearance of everyone. The moment we're around an ordinary person, not only does everything appear as inherently existent, everything appears as ordinary. Everything appears as ordinary. If we stay around His Holiness, it's very easy to think of His Holiness as great if you hardly ever see Him. But if you spend time with His Holiness, let's say you have a 2-week vacation with His Holiness, right? His Holiness manifests as an ordinary person, and we believe in the ordinariness of what we perceive. It becomes that much harder. That's why it's a kindness of the Lama to not allow us to be around them all the time. Not that they don't want to be around their disciples, but they keep a little bit of a myth that we in our mind have a better sense the Guru is beyond everything. Because otherwise, on the tantric level, we see the Guru as ordinary. Because that's how they manifest, and we believe in what appears to our mind. We're used to believing everything our mind suggests. So, since that is so hard, as just one example, your bodhicitta needs to be super, super strong. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes?
I wanted to ask regarding the absence of a conventional truth.
The absence of a conventional truth?
Yeah, absence of a conventional truth that the mind can cognize, right? According to the absence of a conventional truth.
The non-existence of a conventional truth.
Yeah, okay, let me just double check.
There is
the non-existence, the part 2 of the criteria, only something, the non-existence of a conventional truth is part.
Okay, if you're referring to the second criterion, for instance, we talked about yesterday, what are the different criteria for something to exist conventionally? We've heard that it cannot be contradicted. So for something to exist conventionally, it must not be contradicted by a conventional valid cognizer. For instance, this table is not contradicted. The non-existence of this table cannot be perceived. So we need to look at things that don't exist, and the non-existence of which is a conventional truth. So there are categories. I mean, of course, actually something that doesn't exist cannot really be categorized. But we can still think about it this way. So there are non-existences, the non-existence of which exists. So if something doesn't exist, its non-existence is always an existent. That's very important. If something is impossible, it doesn't exist, then its non-existent must exist.
If I could clarify, for example, let's say there's music in the room.
Okay, let me just finish what I said, right? Just a sec, and then I come back to you, because otherwise it gets a little confusing. So, something that doesn't exist, its non-existence always exists. But then that non-existence that does exist is either a conventional truth or an ultimate truth. An example of something that doesn't exist, the non-existence of an ultimate truth, is inherent existence. Inherent existence doesn't exist. Its non-existence exists. The non-existence or the absence of inherent existence exists. It's emptiness. So the absence of inherent existence exists, and it's an ultimate truth. But the horns of the rabbit don't exist. The non-existence of the horns of a rabbit exists, but the non-existence of the horns of a rabbit are a conventional truth. So you see, for everything that is non-existent, its non-existence exists, and it's either a conventional truth, as in the case of inherent existence, or a conventional truth, as in the case of flying cats or horns of a rabbit. Okay, great. So please go on.
Okay, so just to clarify, I'm just trying to give an example.
That's good. Please do.
Let's suppose there's music in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, so the music, let's say a song is played, right? So the song is a conventional truth. Then suppose the question is it Taylor Swift's latest song, example? Like this song that's being played.
Yeah.
Then someone asks, is it Taylor Swift's latest song?
Taylor Swift's latest song, yeah.
Okay, but I wouldn't know because I wouldn't know if she's a singer or if she even has a latest song.
Yeah.
So how do I know it's the absence of the latest song? Because I don't know. So that's the thing I don't understand.
I see. Oh, you understand the difference between existence and non-existence in general, but when it comes to certain examples, how do I know? Well, you better get to know Taylor Swift's songs.
Or let's say Trump's latest song. But let's suppose I didn't...
Trump's latest song?
Yeah, so it's just hypothetical. So what I'm trying to say is there's a song being played.
Right.
But if somebody asks like, oh, is this Trump's latest song? But if I didn't know that Trump's doesn't sing or he doesn't have a little song,
then you
how do
can't
you
answer
know?
it.
Yeah.
You can't answer it. No. Yeah, you can't answer it. Like I said before, when I talked about conventional truth, for instance, or conventionally existent, even though it's merely labeled, we can still, on the basis of something being merely labeled, determine whether it exists or not. Remember I talked about the tree. So the tree, we label it on the basis of certain main characteristics, which are also merely labeled, right? But nevertheless, they exist. So we label on the basis of a merely labeled basis of invitation, we label tree. And then we can determine, can this be called a tree? No, because its characteristics that we associate with the tree are not given. But to be able to determine that, I have to know the main characteristics of this tree, of a tree in general, to determine whether it is a tree or not. And this is true for songs as well. I mean, whether it's Donald Trump's song, I can say Taylor Swift. We don't need to go into even Donald Trump, just Taylor Swift's music. To determine whether it's a song I need to know what are the main characteristics of a particular song. Can you give me an example of a Taylor Swift song? Anyone? Beatles. Okay, Beatles. Let It Be. Is it Let It Go or Let It Be? Let It Be. Okay, so Buddhist influence in Let It Go. Anyway, so Let It Be, right? You have Let It Be. So I need to know the main characteristics of the song Let It Be. So what is the main melody? What are the words? And just a few words, because there may be similar songs that have the same melody and one or two sentences are the same. But in general, I don't think there are. I think it's a very unique song with certain words that help me to recognize. So once I know these main characteristics, I can determine whether the song I'm hearing is the song Let It Be. Okay, but I need to know these main characteristics. Therefore, as a rule, even though something is merely labeled, but the label we use is given to particular main characteristics that help me to distinguish this phenomenon from everything else. So in the case of a tree, everything that is a non-tree. Basically, even my conceptual mind does that. So there's a very interesting topic when you study Buddhist philosophy, in particular when you study the Pramanavartika, when you study logic. There's a topic that means other exclusion. I love that topic. Senjuk is called, like engaging in an object by way of exclusion, which is what our conceptual mind does. Our conceptual mind does not perceive reality the way our eye consciousness perceives. To our eye consciousness, everything that's in the sphere of vision appears. We're not aware of everything, but we have a full picture of what's in front of us, right? That's the appearance. Due to the appearance, our karma, etc. But let's forget about the reasons. But still, direct perception, everything appears to the mind. What is in the sphere of vision? Of course, not the subtle atoms inside, but just what's in the sphere of vision. Our conceptual mind doesn't work like that. If I were to say to you, for instance, look at this phone, so it appears with all the atoms that are at the surface of this phone, they all appear to you. You're not aware of them, but they appear to you. So it appears in a very vivid way. If I ask you, close your eyes and think of that phone, it doesn't appear as clearly. Maybe the colors don't appear that way. So your mind gets at its object through exclusion of everything that is not this phone. So it's just eliminating everything that is not your phone. Which is the same that happens when you use words. When you think the word phone. So it's not like a vivid, like all the details about a phone appear to you, but rather your mind excludes everything that is not phone. That's just how it works. Therefore, when it comes to knowing something like a tree and so forth, all you need to do is exclude everything else, and you can determine we can conceptually determine that it is the song by the Beatles, right? That's how it works. But we need to have some basic information. What are trees? What are other objects? So to be able to know that everything else is a non-tree. That's how we make sense of the world. But that doesn't contradict the fact that we label. But we don't just label out of thin air. It depends on the basis of labeling, a basis of designation. And the main characteristics of a particular object are its basis of designation, usually are its basis of designation, on the basis of which we say tree, and in that way, which enables us now to distinguish us from everything that is not called tree. Does that make sense? So despite phenomena not existing inherently, we can still distinguish between this, that, and the other. That's also the reason why we label. In the first place, we label to make sense of the world. We draw lines where there aren't any lines. They're just conceptual lines. I may distinguish between tables or certain hues of green. I may or I may not. If it's necessary, there's so many different hues, different shades of green. So many different shades of green. I may choose, because it's necessary for me, to give names or labels to each different shade, or I may not. Honestly, in Singapore, there's so many trees, and if you were to put all the leaves of every tree next to each other, you would have many different shades of green. But in order to survive and be able to live in Singapore, you don't need that. Green is enough. Green, 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 green. No problem. If you live in the jungle, and there's a green snake with a particular shade that is poisonous, versus all the other shades of green, you better be able to distinguish this particular shade of green versus all the other greens. And a label helps you to do that. So, in and of itself, it doesn't exist as this green or that green, whatever you want to call it. But we label it, which then helps us to distinguish it, even if it doesn't exist in and of itself as having that label, but we give it this label, and that's totally up to us, doing it or not. Which once again shows, from the side of the object, it doesn't have that name. It's just a differently appearing object, right? But it's necessary for us in that context. But when you live in Singapore, that snake only exists in the zoo, and between you and the snake, there's a plexiglass, whatever, separation. So no, we don't need to know the name of the color, because you don't, by mistake, step on it. There's no danger that you step on it. You see the difference? So whether we draw this line or not is totally up to us. We can see differences. I mean, twins look exactly the same. Okay? They may look exactly, some twins really look exactly the same. So we may just look at them as the two brothers, the two Lin brothers, or the two Miller brothers, or whatever, right? I don't need to distinguish. I see them as one entity. Or if I have two twins, I better know. That's the one who took the cookies, that one just watched. So I better know their name. I can distinguish between them. In fact, I can call this table something every day, because every day is different. But there's no need to do it. Why make it more confusing? Right? Why would I call it 17th of November 2024 tree? It's ridiculous. I could, because it's different in each moment. But it's enough for me to give it one name. That's enough. My problem is that now I believe it's inherently that. And since it's yesterday called table and it's today called table, it doesn't change. My partner, if I had a partner, like the person I'm most attached to possibly. So if I had a spouse, for instance, I would be very attached, of course. So because I call them, Peter today, I call them Peter tomorrow, seems to be inherently existent because it's the same from day to day. I want them to remain the same because they're treating me really well and I think I'm so great, so please don't change that. So I even want them to remain the same. But the thing is, I just keep calling them Peter, 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 although each moment is different. Right? So I refer to them in the same way. I could give each moment a new name. That would be much better to understand they're not the same. I'm not the same. But it makes life too complicated. We don't have time to do that. To each moment give them a different name. Anyway, we've run out of names because there's so many moments. Do you see what I'm saying? Right? This is where our mistake comes in. The labeling is important. It helps us to make sense, but it's totally subjective. Whether we choose to give it another name to this particular hue of green or particular shade of green or not, it depends. It's in relation to other situations, whether it's necessary or not. Okay, great. Yes, please.
I think 2 nights ago you described emptiness, right? How does it feel like and looks like? 2 nights ago, right?
I said that how it looks
a few
like.
nights ago, yeah. I mean, emptiness, like when you meditate on emptiness, is the non-finability and others. So if we go one step further, if we go to the level of non-dual emptiness, would you be able to say, give an idea or description of what would it feel like, or like water pour into water?
Well, first of all, to really understand emptiness, I mean, just that non-findability is not enough. You need to be able to see emptiness and its lack and its interdependence as compatible, so that both emptiness and dependent arising make sense. That the object, and I mean the non-inherent I, for instance, functions, can fully function. In fact, only functions because it lacks inherent existence. So really the complete understanding, this is something many of my teachers very much emphasized, although it seems to, some texts seem to suggest, it's just the non-findability of inherent existence. No, it's not enough. And also the 3 principal aspects of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa support this idea that we need to be able to see both. Just having said that. Okay. But then the non-duality. Well, duality is explained very differently in many different traditions. And it's a little bit, the way it is explained in Buddhism can sound a little unusual. For instance, when we say non-dual emptiness, what does that mean? The term non-duality is usually used when talking about the direct experience of emptiness, directly experiencing emptiness. It's not really saying that emptiness is non-dual, but the mind that directly realizes emptiness, that is non-dual. So the characteristic of non-duality is not applied to the emptiness as such, but to the mind that perceives emptiness directly. That's how it's most commonly used. Yeah, it's I mean, non-dual emptiness. Yes, it may be used sometimes, but it may be used and it may mean that it's emptiness how it actually exists as being free of inherent existence. Yeah, so in that way you could say non-dual emptiness. But as I said, it's most commonly used to describe the experience of emptiness. So to explain that experience when you directly realize emptiness, this is the only time as a sentient being when, first of all, inherent existence doesn't appear to you. There's no appearance of inherent existence. As I've mentioned a few times, our difficulty is, or the fact that it's so hard for us to realize or understand emptiness is that even without having the root misconception active in our continuum, if our ignorance lies dormant, right now it's not active, so we don't actively perceive inherent existence. Nevertheless, inherent existence appears every time when we perceive an object. So I perceive this cup, it appears inherently existent. When I perceive myself, it appears inherently existent. But when I realize emptiness directly, it doesn't appear. That's the only mind in my mental continuum that does not have the appearance of inherent existence. So, from that point of view, we say the mind is non-dual because there is no appearance of anything existing inherently. That's one reason it's non-dual. A second reason is that no conventional truth appears to it. No conventional truth. Only the ultimate truth appears to it. When, for instance, you perceive emptiness conceptually, when you have an inferential cognition of emptiness, a conceptual mind that realizes emptiness, you have the appearance of inherent existence and you have the appearance of a conventional truth. What are these two? What is the appearance of inherent existence? When, for instance, to give you an example, I meditate on myself. I go through the reasoning. First of all, I identify the inherently existent I, or the inherent existence of the I. I identify that as the object of negation, and now I apply the reasoning why it cannot exist. So either it's one with the aggregates or separate from the aggregates, and when I come to understand it's neither one with the aggregates nor separate from the aggregates, I can come to the conclusion it doesn't exist inherently. It cannot be found to exist in any of the possibilities that present themselves, and that there is no other way it could exist, and I come to the conclusion it's not findable, it's not there. Now that conceptual mind, what appears to it to exist inherently? Not the I, but the lack of inherent existence of the I. The emptiness of the I, it appears to it. The emptiness of the I appears to that mind. I conceptually know the lack of inherent existence of the I. I know that appears to the mind, but the lack of inherent existence of the I, that appears to exist inherently. That appears to exist inherently. So the I doesn't appear to exist inherently, but the emptiness of the I appears to exist inherently. That's one problem with a conceptual mind. That's why it's dual. Secondly, as a conceptual mind, it needs a generic image. It has a meaning generality, a generic image. It can never directly get at its object, which is the appearance of emptiness of the I. The appearance, it's just that, it's called that. I mean, it's that generic image of what emptiness means to me. That's a conceptual truth. That's a conventional truth. It's not emptiness. The generic image, the representation of emptiness, what emptiness means to me, is not actual emptiness. That appears to my mind. That's a conventional truth. And through that, I can understand my I lacks inherent existence. So you have a reason for two reasons why the conceptual mind perceiving the emptiness of the I is dual. Inherent existence appears to it, the inherent existence of the emptiness of the I, and a conventional truth appears to it, which is the generic image. Plus, due to all this mind, there's a sense from the perspective of this mind, the mind perceives an object over there. There seems to be a distance. The mind is not fully absorbed into its object. There's more the sense of subject and object are separate. That's a third reason why it's a dual mind. When you realize emptiness directly, none of these apply. First of all, emptiness itself doesn't appear to exist inherently, because you realize also the emptiness of the emptiness. The emptiness of the emptiness appears. So the emptiness of the emptiness appears, then the lack of inherent existence of the emptiness appears, which is why the emptiness cannot appear as existing inherently. So it's the emptiness of the emptiness. So it's just emptiness appears to it. No inherent existence can appear to it. Since it's a direct experience of emptiness, there's no conventional truth that appears. And likewise, there's no sense for the mind, I'm observing, the sense of the mind observing something separate from itself. The mind is just totally absorbed into its object. There's no sense of subject and object being separate. Which is why we say that direct experience is non-dual in all three ways. no appearance of inherent existence, no appearance of conventional truth, and no sense that subject and object are separate. So it's a non-dual mind in all three respects. That's it. That's how duality is usually used. It's usually used in the context of how our mind perceives something. Does that answer your question? That was a little complicated. But of course, in other traditions, for instance, non-Buddhist traditions, ancient Indian non-Buddhist traditions, they've used the word dual, like Brahma and the rest of the world, and a lot of... So the Buddha basically used the same vocabulary that people... So let's think, 2,600 years ago, when the Buddha came, people talked in a particular way about the true truth, about duality, about liberation. They had certain vocabulary that was common, and it was a lot of the explanations that people gave in these philosophical systems. There were similarities to Buddhism, to Buddhist ideas. So the Buddha came at the right time when people's mind had become very flexible already based on many of the philosophical systems at the time. Their minds were ready. Reincarnation they believed in. There were ideas of true truth. There were ideas of moksha or liberation. So the Buddha didn't have to explain too much, but just say, it's not exactly that there is a self, there's no self. But they had already a good sense of what the object of negation is, at least on the Kosa level, because they accepted such a self. So in that way, it was the right time. However, nowadays, unfortunately, we don't talk like that. So duality in Western philosophy has taken on a totally different meaning. We've taken it we don't really understand it, not even in the ancient way in which it was used in India, which was also different, of course, from the Buddhist way. So the Buddha used the same word, but redefined it, which is why it's sometimes easier to be introduced to a concept we have no previous concept of, versus duality. It's always like duality seems to imply there's something here and something over there, right? So non-dual emptiness. What would that be? What is the one over here? What is the one over there? So with regard to the mind, that works. Mind over here, object over there. So like water being poured into water, that kind of sense. That works in that kind of case. But again, it takes some getting used to. Further duality, no, it's usually just used in that context, yeah.
Just a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
Just now you said the first emptiness, right? The emptiness on something. That one is a conventional truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then the emptiness on the emptiness.
No, I didn't say that. Okay. I said this. If you conceptually think about the emptiness of yourself,
right.
A conceptual mind can only know the emptiness of one particular phenomenon. So when you know the emptiness of yourself, that same mind can't take to mind the emptiness of yourself. It's one of the two. So let's say you perceive the emptiness of your mind. But since it's a conceptual mind, then the inherent existence of the emptiness of your mind appears, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But when you have a direct experience of emptiness, you realize the emptiness of every phenomenon, of the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness of everything. So it's just, there's no conventional truth appearing at all. There's nothing else. It's just absorbed into emptiness, which is why the inherent existence of the emptiness or the emptiness of the emptiness or anything else doesn't appear to the mind. That's what I meant by this. Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, Dalgis?
What makes a conventional valid cognizer valid?
Oh, what makes a conventional valid cognizer valid? All right. Okay.
An example, because I could see all shades of green as green. I say that's green.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're an expert in colors, and you say no, that's a very specific flower of green.
Mm-hmm.
Are we both conventional valid cognizers?
Okay, so Dalglish, am I saying it right? Dalglish is saying, all right, let's say I call a particular shade of green emerald green. You call it green. Are our views contradictory? If he says it's green and I say it's emerald green, is our view contradictory? If I say Dalglish is a person and Wayne says Dalglish is Singaporean, are our views contradictory? No, because Singaporean is a subcategory of person. So I may not know what nationality Dalglish has, or well, probably now American nationality, but I don't know. But the point is, I don't know what his nationality is, but I'm still not wrong saying he's a person. So just because I don't say he's Singaporean, I say he's a person, but our view's not contradictory.
So and then the example you gave in the text was the Earth is round. The Earth being round.
Oh, the round.
Or the Earth revolves around the sun rather than the other way around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At some point, like scientific analysis made it possible to calculate that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Yes,
Until then, before that, when they thought the other way, was that conventionally valid cognition?
Okay, good question. So Dalglish is saying, so before it was commonly accepted that the world is round, was the word flat. Because people labeled it flat. A few people disagreed, they got probably thrown out of the church or whatever happened to them, or maybe they got executed by the church because it was illegal at some point. But the majority thought the world was flat. We label the world is flat. Was the world flat? Calvin's very clearly saying no. Calvin, why not?
Because it is not incontrovertible.
Because there was no valid conventional mind that perceived the world to be round. There were flat. Sorry. There was no, as he's saying, there was no conventional valid cognizer that recognized that the world is round. Flat. There's no conventional valid cognizer that recognized the world was flat. Right? Okay, very good. There were plenty of wrong consciousnesses that, it's not like the world turned round sometime around the 15th century. We can all agree that it was always round. If it had been different, it was flat before and then it became round when people believed it. But that's, of course, not the case. So, from a Buddhist point of view, the earth has always been flat, has always been round, but has never been a valid cognizer, or maybe with a few exceptions that perceived it, at least not that we know of. But you see, I use the word from a Buddhist point of view because my mind already went to another example where I have to be a little careful. Of the 8 billion people in this world, how many people believe in an omnipotent God? From a Buddhist point of view, does not exist. Millions of people. I'm not saying of God that there's no God. That's a different matter. But the God that is described in Christianity or in Islam or in Judaism, I'm pretty sure in general people would accept omniscient and omnipotent. From a Buddhist point of view, that's not possible. Not even Buddha can be omnipotent. So although millions, billions of people believe in the existence of such a God, it doesn't make it true. There's no valid cognizer. Basically, it's faith. And here I have to speak from a Buddhist point of view. When you ask, what is your proof for the existence of an omnipotent God? The proof is it says so in the Bible. I've asked this question, what is your proof? And the answer is usually, it says so in the Bible. Now, from a Buddhist point of view, you can never come to a valid cognition of something merely because someone says so. Either it's through logic, that you can access it, right? If someone says there's a fire in your neighbor's house, I can believe it, but I don't know for certain. I just believe in these words, and based on that, I call the fire department. However, to really know there's fire in my neighbor's house, either I have to look inside to see the fire for myself, or I infer it on the basis of the smoke I see billowing out of his window, out of their window. Therefore, it becomes pretty clear that just someone telling me is not enough. This is why the Buddha teaching us is only the first step. We then have to still do the work. To come to an incontrovertible understanding, we have to do all the work. So, to go back to your original question, what about when people still believed in it? Did it make the word flat? No, it didn't. Because there was no valid cognizer. But your very first question was, what does it mean to be a conventional valid cognizer? So, what does it mean to be a conventional valid cognizer? An ultimate valid cognizer, that is easier, isn't it? Okay, so once you understand karma vipassana. Okay, so what about a conventional valid cognizer? Well, I talked about it a little bit in the last few days, but more in a different context, so it may not be clear yet. So, again, first of all, in terms of everything other than emptiness, going back to the tree, for instance, well, if we define a particular object, such as the tree, we say it has these main characteristics, and if something has these main characteristics, we call it true. Similarly, when we say the earth we live on, if we give it the main characteristic of being flat, having a certain size and you can fall off it, and we call this earth, right? Okay, well, but if that's the earth we live on, there's a contradiction because the earth we live on isn't flat. So actually what we call earth what we live on, this planet, that contains Singapore and all other countries, but its main characteristic is not that it's flat. So then we're wrongly labeling. Because the moment we see it, the earth we're talking about, it's actually round. And its basis of designation is a round planet. It's not exactly round, but let's just agree on it's round versus flat. So how do I know it's a valid cognizer? Well, what are the main characteristics that distinguish it from another planet, for instance? Well, it's definitely its shape. One of its characteristics is its shape. And if all of these are given, and I can establish that that which we call earth, that which we live on, one of its main characteristics is that it's round, and if I take to mind all the other main characteristics of it, then I can compare. Is that what I call it? Does that accord with the main characteristics I give it? And if yes, then the mind that perceives it is a correct mind. But if one of these characteristics is missing, if instead I perceive it to be flat, the mind that perceives it cannot be a valid mind. It's as simple as that. Or leaving getting back to the tree or a table. Like a table. I mean, I could use it as a chair. I could use it from tomorrow on as a chair. But we don't use it this way. This object, since its construction, or since it was, let me look at it, it's probably not made in, or maybe it's made in Singapore or from India, I'm not sure. Anyway, so since it was brought into this room, it has always been used as a table. So its function is such, we use it as a table. It has certain characteristics, a certain shape, a certain size, a certain height, etc. And based on that, we call it table, right? We've all agreed, these are the main characteristics of a table. They're given here. It has the function of a table, that's how we use it. So we call it a table. If instead I call it a toothbrush, well, that's not a correct mind, because how I define a toothbrush, the main characteristics of the toothbrush, what I call the toothbrush and its main characteristics, are in no way given. So only a mind that perceives this to be a table is a conventional valid cognizer. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think implicit in what you're saying is our knowledge of the characteristics is changing every day.
That is true, but they're not changing into toothbrush characteristics.
Usually, like Taylor Swift, like she'll keep coming up with new songs.
Pardon?
She'll keep, like Taylor Swift will keep coming up with new songs. So there'll be new characteristics. They will learn new characteristics.
Are you talking about Taylor Swift?
Like just now the example, yeah.
Yeah. Are you talking about the person, the singer, or are you talking about this?
The song that she keep producing, you have to keep
updating.
Oh yes, yes. Oh yes. Oh, this way. Okay, now I understand. Oh, okay. So the latest song of Taylor Swift that keeps changing. Yeah. So the latest song of Taylor Swift is always a different one. Yes, absolutely. So to be able to know what is the latest song of Taylor Swift, yes, you have to keep on. So the good thing is this doesn't become something else the next day. But of course, the latest song changes. Or the latest book of a certain author, or the latest movie of a certain producer. Yes, absolutely. To be able to decide that, we need to keep updated. The new president. Yeah, absolutely. But the president can be, even the new president, can this person be called president? There are also certain characteristics that help us to then decide, is this a valid president or not? Did they win the election, etc.? Have there been, yeah, so there's certain characteristics, absolutely. Yes. Wow, Perry's killing fit today. A lot of walking.
Going back to what was briefly mentioned earlier, the power of our karma,
yes,
and the power of the Buddha.
Yes.
I remember it was quite shocking. Rinpoche told us this many years ago in one of his teachings,
yeah,
that the power of our karma is stronger than that of the Buddha, because if the Buddha was stronger, then he wouldn't allow us to suffer.
That's it.
Yeah, that was the reason. But I'm trying to understand why is our karma stronger. Knowing that the Buddha is not in Buddhism, the Buddha is not omnipotent, but an omniscient being. But why is our karma so strong?
Well, I need to specify, our karma can be stronger. I don't think it's always stronger, because otherwise the Buddha couldn't help us to avoid certain problems, for instance. I mean, karma is so complicated. That's why they say it's extremely hidden. Because, for instance, if I have the karma to become rich, I could have the karma in the next life to become rich. But there's so many different types. I could have the karma to be rich without doing anything. Even without going to school. What could be an example? My parents are super rich and they give me all their money. Even before, as long as they live, they have enough to give me millions and millions. So even if I didn't go to school, I'd be rich my whole life. That would be one example of being rich. I could have the karma to be rich only after I'm halfway through my life. So let's say I live up to 80. At 40 years, I become rich someday. So I have the karma to become rich. Or I have the karma to become rich when I work reasonably hard. Well, I go to school and then I have a brilliant idea at 18, some kind of computer program that turns me into a billionaire. It wasn't much work, I was good at it anyway, it was my hobby. Or I have the karma to be rich by working really hard, working my butt off, for lack of a better word, and at the age of whatever, 50, 60, I become a millionaire. You see, all this. So there are all these different possibilities depending on how I practice generosity. There's so many different possibilities. I may have the karma to get sick, but that karma, before it ripens, it could be purified. And so the Buddha sees this. Once, I remember when I finished my studies, when I got the Geshe degree, Lama Zopa Rinpoche came to Tushita. And I thought, wow, everything I studied is there in this person. It was a very amazing experience. And it was so wonderful just to be around Rinpoche. I'm laughing about it, but because I just enjoyed that bliss. And one day I got a phone call from Venerable Roger, and he said, I have to meet you. Can you come to One Ku Cafe? And I was like, oh, life, this blissful experience with Rinpoche around, and now I get to see Venerable Roger. And he tells me, well, Rinpoche made an observation, and you have some life obstacle. You may die if you don't do a certain retreat. I was like, oh no, I just finished and I'm going to die and do it all over again. And now I know Tibetan and I have to do it all over again. Oh no. I was like, my whole bliss just going to collapse. You know, immortality, of course, in my face. And I was like, yeah, I want to survive, of course. So I did what Rinpoche told me, and it was me and another nun who were told the same thing, and we had to do a retreat, and we did. We received teachings, and I translated for her. She didn't know Tibetan. Both of us, we went to see this other Lama and received very extensive teachings. We both did the retreat. She passed away. I'm still here. Who knows how long? I never forgot that. So the thing was, I think Rinpoche saved my life. How long it can be saved, I don't know. So for me, this is an example where, in the second case, Rinpoche gave this person the best preparation for the next life. It couldn't be better. Because shortly after the retreat, she passed away, I've heard. It wasn't that long afterwards. And she was well prepared. She did a retreat. In my case, it's been longer, who knows. But it showed me that Rinpoche was able to catch it. Maybe I would have, died shortly afterwards. Who knows? So that is one example I can think of. So in terms of the Lama catching it before it ripens. And I created another karma, because if I hadn't, this whole Rinpoche could have not passed it on to me. Somehow I wouldn't. So I also must have created the karma to be saved in that moment. Which is also why it's so important to help other people. If they're really, really in trouble, they may not have the karma to be saved, which is what we may experience, and we shouldn't be frustrated if everything we do ends up with them still not being able to help them. I mean, sometimes, as a doctor, for instance, you give everything to save your patient, and in the end, they still pass away. So to understand in that moment, maybe you lengthened their life. We don't know, but maybe the karma was stronger in that moment. So we should still try, because they may also have the karma to be saved, and we'll find out if the person survives. If we have given them everything, we've given, as a physician, we've given them the right kind of treatment and they survived, well, then our treatment was just as essential as the karma that they had accumulated. So there's always two sides to it. Yeah. And therefore I'm saying it's not always that the Buddhas cannot do everything, but sometimes the karma is stronger, especially when it started to ripen. And if it's a very powerful karma, there may not be anything you can do. Yeah. So that was just an example. So why is that? That was the original question. It just is. I mean, you could go further. Why are things impermanent? Why is there karma in the first place, right? Unfortunately, it just is. There's no other answer. It just is. Yeah. Why do we exist if we ask these kind of questions? Yeah, very difficult to answer. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, go ahead. Yes, you were first.
So since our karma is stronger, so how
sometimes stronger.
Okay, sometimes. So how do we convince ourselves that every time after we do Vajrasattva, it completely purifies our negative karma?
First of all, we don't know whether it purified everything. No, it didn't. I don't think it. I mean, it's okay. So you just visualize that, and the thing is, okay, just to add a little bit to what you just said. So with Vajrasattva, we visualize. We have the determination. That's best. That's just the power of our own mind to visualize everything. We purify everything. That makes our practice psychologically more effective. But whether we really catch everything, it's not that simple, right? We may purify some imprints of one karma, but there are other ones still left that may still ripen. Yeah, so purification takes, of course, more time. And if you do it on a daily basis, just the 21 times, they usually just take care of purifying or preventing the karma we accumulated today from multiplying. Because that's, of course, the other problem, that karma multiplies. The good news is that it happens also with virtuous karma. Virtuous karma multiplies and non-virtuous karma multiplies. But in order to prevent that multiplication of karma, that expansion of karma, on a daily basis we should do the bodhisattva practice. And then if you do a longer retreat, you can take care of even more imprints. However, yeah, even 3 months is not enough. But the good thing is, even in your daily life, you can purify. I mean, for instance, if you have a job that helps people anyway, I mean, that doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a surgeon or a doctor or a nurse. I mean, even just working, and I'm just giving a silly example, like cleaning the garbage. I'm very grateful to people picking up the garbage. I'm very grateful. In McLeod, where I live, for the longest time there wasn't anyone, and you had to find somewhere where you can leave your garbage, and it was stressful. Now there are people who pick it up every few days, and I'm so grateful to them, because what do you do with it? So if you, for instance, like a garbage collector, I'm just giving an example, it doesn't have to be something fancy, with a fancy PhD or something. You're giving a service to people. So with your motivation, first you take refuge, you generate regret, whatever non-virtue I've done, and also that's the first power. So taking refuge to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the power of reliance, then the power of regret. Whatever non-virtues I've accumulated, may I be able to purify them. Then the power of the resolve. I will give my best to not accumulate any non-virtue again. I'll give my best. And what is the remedy? Working as a garbage collector. So this action can actually, because the action, even if it's something neutral, such as Rajasatva, that doesn't directly help anyone. So if it's something neutral and that's beneficial, benefiting others is also beneficial. You're not as focused in that moment because you have to do other things. While you recite the Bodhisattva mantra, you actively use the power of your mind to visualize you're purifying. That's the power of the mind. However, still it works if you apply the 3 powers. In fact, actually all our virtuous actions, our karmic imprints are not permanent. I believe our karma is constantly changing because of virtuous thoughts that may purify negative karmic imprints. Of course, negative thoughts like anger, they destroy positive karmic imprints. So our daily actions are constantly changing our mind, which is basically that which holds the imprints. The imprints are not like in a golf ball, the little indentations that always remain the same while the golf ball our mind changes. You shouldn't see them as separate. I remember Geshe Kelsang, he also taught at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics. He was actually our teacher on the Abhidharma in Tibetan. Like he was our philosophy teacher before he started teaching Westerners. Before he started translating First Holiness, he taught us for about a year or 2. And he also talked about that. He said, like, don't think of the imprints like little dots in your mind, and your mind is changing, but the dots are not. So that made it very clear. Imprints is just the label we give to something in our mind that has changed because of a particular action we have accumulated. So it's a very static, non-static situation. Everything is constantly changing. And therefore, yeah, even our karma changes through our actions. But to come back to your question, therefore, when you purify, certain actions go, but other actions basically stay. It's not that simple. So go on, please, with your question. If there's still a question left. There isn't any? Did I answer everything?
So I do my 25 Buddha prostration.
Yes.
So every time I come to the end, so they will say like the Buddha came and then you are completely purified. I have this hard time convincing myself that I'm purified. Because I know I have limitless, endless of negative karma.
Very good. You have just hit the Buddhist psychology in the sense that, we visualize we take all the suffering of sentient beings. And then you look around, oh my God, they're still suffering. It's a psychological tool that's very effective. For instance, athletes, they use the same tool. You visualize, you'll be the person who wins the race. It prepares your mind for winning the race, right? You visualize impossible things. You visualize, I take all sentient beings to enlightenment first, and then it's me. Right? Shepherd like bodhicitta, ferryman like bodhicitta. All these visualizations you do that are have a powerful effect on your mind, even though they're not realistic. You visualize you're Buddha. Right? I'm not. I know I'm not. Of course not. Nothing. So the opposite of a Buddha. And still, I visualize that because that's the power of the mind. If you visualize something already has happened, you can do, like athletes. Some athletes, they visualize certain movements, like gymnasts. They cannot do it, but you visualize it, you create new pathways in your brain, to use a neuroscientific term, and your mind, you train your mind by putting the effect, making the effect part of the cause. That's how psychology works. So you visualize yourself, I'm a Buddha, I'm a purified being. You leave powerful imprints for actually becoming such a purified being. You visualize you take the suffering of sentient beings. It prepares your mind for the time when you're able to do it. It's just psychology. Buddhism is all about psychology. Right? Everything you're supposed to do, even devotion. The Buddha doesn't care about being devotion, whether you cut the Buddha's arm off, or you apply ointment or massages. For the Buddha, it's all the same. As in, like, they love sentient beings the same. They love the person who chops off their arm in the same way as the person who cuts off their arm. But they're concerned for the person who cuts off their arm because they're harming themselves. And devotion, it's not for the Buddhas. Devotion is a very healthy state of mind that helps us to go beyond our ordinary mind. It calms the mind, it gives joy to our mind, and it helps us to go beyond our ordinary thoughts. It's as simple as that. So know that everything in Buddhist practice, directly or indirectly, helps you psychologically. Visualizing you just purified everything helps you, even though you know it's not true, but it helps you. Keeping that in mind, remember what I said earlier? When you fake it until you make it, same psychology. Same psychology, right? It's we rise from within emptiness, of course, that you arise as a Buddha. So you don't want to become an inherently existent Buddha, so you visualize, of course, arising from within emptiness. That's very important. But here in this case of visualizing, I've just purified all negativity, you don't even think of emptiness in that moment. You actually visualize, I've eliminated all afflictions. That's fake, in a way, but it's a positive fake. It's a faking it until you make it, literally. Until you actually have purified all negativities. Right? So you use the mind, and this is not called a wrong consciousness, because you know this is not reality, but still you choose to visualize it because it has such a powerful psychological effect on the mind. Right? So remember that when you do the practice of when there's stress. I love it. A little bit more of that. When people insult you, oh, thank you guys, a little bit more of it. You give me the, right? It doesn't feel that way, but you switch your mind. You basically switch, visualizing it's good for me, and then that's what it becomes. That's the power of the mind. That's why we pray. Prayers are very important. One more thing, I want to talk about this. Because prayers, like what? You know, like in Christianity, there's so much like, just pray, just pray, just pray. It doesn't seem to make sense. Praying to someone who doesn't even exist from a Buddhist point of view, and just praying, of course it's not just praying. I told some of you this joke, and someone else told me another joke that just works as well. But this joke, there's a joke where someone prays, let's say to Buddha, please let me win the lottery. Please let me win the lottery. Please let me win the lottery. And one day Buddha is like desperate and says, please buy a lottery ticket. Right? So praying is not enough. Praying is not enough. But this other person, like, who's, I only know, like, they're drowning. They're drowning in like some kind of flood. I was told it in a slightly different way, but yeah, it's a similar joke. Drowning, and they're like, please, Buddha, help me, help me. And so a helicopter comes, and they want to pull him out, and he says, no, Buddha is going to come and rescue me. And then later on, I don't know, a boat comes, and again, they like want to pull him out, and he's like, no, Buddha is going to rescue me. And then they die, and they get to see Buddha, and they're like, why didn't you rescue me? And he's like, I sent a helicopter and a ship. So you see, that is a really good, I really like this example, in that we still have to accumulate the right causes and conditions, number one. So for the first joke, buy a lottery ticket. I mean, if we want to, for instance, learn the Dharma, well, go to classes, buy books. Don't just expect knowledge to suddenly be there overnight. That's not going to happen. But then, praying has two purposes. First, you have to accumulate the causes and conditions. Of course, do whatever ordinarily people do to be able to study, for instance, the Dharma. But secondly, it's the power of our mind. Because we set the mind in a certain direction, therefore, we set it in a certain direction, and then we automatically create the right kind of causes and conditions. And also, any kind of virtue can be transformed to then help us in this endeavor. That's why we dedicate. Any kind of virtue should not ripen in us becoming rich or powerful. It could, potentially, but instead, we save it. It's like, get money, you don't just spend it, but you put it in the bank. You direct it at certain, or invest it. It's a bit like that. That's the power of the mind. You direct where it's going. You direct. So with this aspiration, any kind of virtue is then used as an assisting cause for that to be accomplished. That's why you need these aspirations. Secondly, you ask for the assistance of great beings around us. Not that they can take our suffering or implant their knowledge. No, but to help us whenever possible, right? Maybe to inspire us in the right direction. Maybe we suddenly have that intuition, I should go and see this teacher, which is inspired by the Buddhas. So it's like sending the helicopter or the ship. So we don't recognize that, but suddenly things fall into place. They could assist us if we're open to it. So our mind, from its own side, puts us in the right direction, and we are assisted, right? As we are assisted by people in our daily life, our parents, our teachers. So we also open ourselves to the help of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas by requesting them. This is how the mind works. So we need to accumulate the causes and conditions, what ordinarily, in terms of common sense, we need to do, but prayer is very, very powerful. One more thing about prayer. When I first became a nun, I was, after high school, I traveled a little bit, I came to Dharamsala, and I wanted to leave actually after that. I was going to go to university, my parents were like vivid, but because I was a year younger than my classmates, I felt I had all the time in the world. But my parents didn't agree, and they wanted me to come back now. And I was going to start university. And the last place I came to was Dharamsala. And the reason I came to Dharamsala was because of the chocolate cake, to be honest. Someone told me about the chocolate cake and the Dalai Lama, but I didn't know who the Dalai Lama was, so I literally came for the chocolate cake. And that was my last stop. And I remember the next morning, when I woke up the next morning, I felt like, wow. I felt like I was home. But that's just the presence of His holiness, you know, it puts people's mind in a very calm state. A lot of people report this. However busy it may be on the streets and everything, so many people there, and still, His holiness puts your mind at rest. It's incredible. So it was really through the power of His holiness that I decided to stay. And I learned about Buddhism. I had nothing else to do. I had some friends there, so I went to take a Buddhist course. Wow, it changed my life. Because I was just doing this. And a few months later, after I had my experience with the Australian monk and the German nun, the German Greek nun, you know, oh my God, they're so silly. I had the thought myself, oh, becoming a nun. Okay, so I thought about it, and I was really scared, but I wanted it on one hand. I was scared because I had only finished high school. So if I be a nun, and so many monks and nuns disrobe, well, maybe I'll end up washing dishes at McDonald's if I disrobe at 36 or something, right? That was my worry. So I thought about it. Actually, there was a nun in Australia who I've never met, who inspired me to become a nun, Geshe Kelsang. I had never met her. I hear she's amazing, and I just remembered the other day, I need to send her a gift. It's her who inspired me to become a nun. I've never met her, right? But she inspired me. Everyone told me about her, and I wanted to be like her. Anyway, I was worried, but eventually I made this decision. I became a nun. But then, I first took Lapjung, which are the first vows, and then I took Getsu at Kopan. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche was there. Kirti Center Rinpoche gave the vows, Lama Zopa Rinpoche was there, and there were a lot of Kopan monks, but also about 8 or maybe 10 foreigners. And the thing is, usually they say 50% of foreigners disrobe. I don't know whether it's still the same ratio, I don't know whether it's still the same amount, but I knew it was hard. And we all spent a lot of time together, these 8 or 9 months. We all spent time together. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche advised us, do a lot of prayers. Do prayers. And somehow we were all of us scared to disrobe. So we went down to Bodha, the Bodha Stupa, and the whole night we prayed. We prayed, may we be able to be nuns our whole life. We prayed for days. Really, we became like praying. None of us has disrobed. 34 years later, none of us has disrobed. Right? Wow, the power of prayer. I thought, I didn't know, I didn't stay in touch. I know 1 or 2 who are still ordained, but then last year I met someone who knows all, who's in touch with all of them, said none of us disrobe. And I was, wow, that's the power of prayer. It works. It works. We really gave, and that's why I tell every new monk or nun, pray. I mean, of course, do everything else, keep your vows and study and do whatever else. But another cause is pray. It's so powerful, and there's no scientific proof for that. And to take it even further, to go into the mysticism of Buddhism. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he teaches to a very vast audience, which includes scientists, which includes non-Buddhists. His Holiness doesn't talk so much about reincarnation, if at all. Karma, yes, sometimes, but mainly about what we should do here and now. Bodhicitta, emptiness. He doesn't talk about the pure realms, because he doesn't talk about, this is not something that scientists would accept, but there's no contradiction. And through Geshe Kelsang, I really believe in the importance of the pure realms. And I'm so happy to hear that here in Singapore, you hear, there are a lot of teachings about this. First I was like, this, honestly, sorry for my English, this is rubbish. That was my first thought. I'm a scientific, I like science, pure realm, that's some kind of fantasy. Really, I had this very strong view. I didn't like pure realm teachings. It didn't make any sense to me. teachings are like a place you can go to. That sounds like Christianity in some kind of heaven. I totally misunderstood. It didn't make, like, honestly, no, this was the last thing I wanted to hear. When someone said Pure Land teachings, I would run the other way. I was not interested. And then Geshe Kelsang came along, right? Amitabha, Pure Land. I was like, yeah, right. I thought it was just some, sorry, my wrong views, I apologize, but that's just a Chinese tradition, I don't know where it's from, and that doesn't seem to be Nalanda Buddhism to me. I was totally wrong. Geshe Kelsang, who researched this to such a degree, and based on everything we know that my experience of the desire realm is the result of my karma. Go back to the bowl of fluid. I perceive it as water, another being perceives it as pus and blood, a third being as nectar, and another being as nothing. It's all dependent on our karma. There's no objective world out there. If we remember that, well, why couldn't there be another existence? I just can't see it. My sense consciousnesses don't allow me to see it. I mean, I don't even see what a dragonfly sees, although I'm aware of a dragonfly. Remember, I gave the example, but very different experience. How does a dragonfly perceive this room? Very different to me, for instance. So thinking about that, why couldn't there be an existence that provides the Dharma? That provides the Dharma in such a way, because these Buddhas, through the power of their mind, they are the power of their prayers, and of course the karma of sentient beings, etc. There are certain states of existence, just as this realm is the result of our karmic actions too. And then it started making sense slowly. And the problem is, in this world, if you are, well, the good news is if you are highly qualified bodhisattvas, this is the best place. A lot of mess, a lot of problems, a lot of suffering. If you're a bodhisattva, you thrive in that mess. So many opportunities to practice patience and generosity and love and compassion. Great. As long as the Dalai Lama, I'm sure he loves the messier it is, the better. But for me, my mind is weak. How do I know in my next life there could be a powerful karma that turns me around, that turns me away from the Dharma? I just want to get rich and famous, leave it. I don't know, it's possible. So in these pure realms, once you're reborn there, it takes longer. Of course, you don't have all this mess that helps you to quickly, but it's safe. And my mind needs safe. My mind, I don't trust my mind. I really don't trust my mind. I have good days, right? I feel like I take one step forward, and then I have bad days, I'm taking 5 steps backwards. Therefore, I like the idea of I think it's wonderful. This is a safe place. You can always come back to this world, it's possible. But for the time being, to intensely study the Dharma and practice the Dharma, in this world it's disappearing. Not just in the FPMT, not just the monasteries. There are problems to find enough monks and nuns. So Buddhism, in the form of an institution that passes on these teachings, that keeps them alive through the debate, that's disappearing. So as Susanna said in one teaching some time ago, Buddhism will turn into a religion that is practiced at home. Like Hinduism. You don't have many monks and nuns in Hinduism any longer. It's a devotional practice that people do. Buddhism will continue another 2,500 years, but not in the form as we know it. So we won't have the same access to it. This is really quickly disappearing, we can tell. Less and less younger Buddhists, less and less monks and nuns. So the Pure Realms are a good place to go. And you're receiving a lot of Pure Realm teachings. Geshe Kelsang giving incredible teachings, so much research on them. I hear Mingyu Rinpoche teaches on them. As long as the Karmapa is now teaching on them. The time is right when the Dharma is disappearing in this world to look at a different existence. This is just clever. And now I'm very grateful to the Chinese Dharma students who hold on to their belief, and therefore now even us in the West develop an interest in it. I know some people from Germany who've been students of the, oops, it keeps cutting out. I can also take the out actually. So even students from other countries who probably like me first thought, what is this? But now understand the need for it. So there's no contradiction. Someone asked me, His Holiness doesn't talk about this, so how is this relevant? But it is relevant because His Holiness' teaching style is slightly different, but it's not contradictory to these teachings. They are really important. And TBC is working on making all these teachings available, which is great. So yeah, I'm so grateful to TBC and all the other centers, ABC, etc., and all the other places where the pure arms are taught. It's very important. It's great. And even if we're not reborn there, by acting, I mean, we have to, of course, accumulate the causes, and if then we're not reborn there, at least we're moving in the right direction, and hopefully at some point we are reborn there. Yeah, so this is very precious. Just wanted to emphasize that. Yeah. All right, further questions? I can go on long. But you have to, of course, check. It's okay. I mean, the material, yeah.
Sorry, can I ask about the materials at the
Please.
end?
Yeah.
What is the difference between a pure Bodhisattva seeing of mere conventionalities and the Buddha's seeing by way of not seeing?
Oh, you're asking the most difficult. All right, so this is a little bit complicated, yeah. Unfortunately, time did kind of run out a little bit, so I couldn't go into all these details. Still, I'm deeply impressed by the fact that I could teach this. I taught the same material in Bodhicitta in June, 11 days, and I taught every day between 6 and 8 hours on this text. So there was a lot more time, and I could go into these details. Okay. Well, to say this much, a bodhisattva who has eliminated the afflictive obscurations, or anyone who has eliminated, a solitary realizer, who has eliminated the subtle obscurations, I'm trying to find it right now, for them, they still call conventional truth, first of all, because their truth truth for the ignorance of other living beings, right? But because their own ignorance is gone, from their perspective, they're mere conventionalities. So here the word conventionality means they're mere relative phenomena, merely labeled, you could say, like mere conventionalities. They're not conventional truth any longer. Okay, so this is one thing. Just to briefly, so here it says, as arhats, the three beings, so arhats, like arhats who are hearers, arhats who are solitary realizers, I can also take the microphone, and arhats who are bodhisattvas, those are called the three beings. They have eliminated the concealer, thank you, they have eliminated the concealer. Eliminated the concealer ignorance, and so therefore from their perspective conventional truth are not actual truth but mere conventionalities. Okay, so this part I think is okay, we can work with that. But then there's this difficulty about the Buddha. The Buddha is a little harder. Maybe I can just quickly go to page 46. How does the Buddha realize the conventional truth? Since the Buddha doesn't label. If you need to go, of course, by all means. Take care. How does the Buddha know the conventional truth when the Buddha does not label? Okay. So, first of all, Buddhas have eliminated all the mental obstructions.
and they simultaneously and directly realize both truth with every mind, 5 sense consciousnesses and their mental consciousness. They directly realize all phenomena. So our mind's ability is to know everything. That's the nature of our mind. Our mind actually has the ability to know everything, but it's obstructed right now. Thank you. It's obstructed right now. But once these obstructions are gone, your mind does exactly what it knows best to do, is to know things. That is true for a Buddha. So Acharya Chandrakirti, I should no longer call him Chandrakirti, I'll end there actually. Acharya Chandrakirti, no, he's so right, oh gosh, I have to rewrite this. So Acharya Chandrakirti uses an analogy to illustrate how Buddha realizes the true truth. Okay, so here it's about the example that is given of hair, falling hair. Someone has a disease when hair falls down. This is explained. I explained it in this floaters. It's a particular eye disease when the vitreous, the jelly-like substance in your eyeball, there's some changes in it, and you suddenly see like little shapes. So they describe it as falling hair. So you have little stripes and dots, etc., hair-like strings. Okay, so this disease, actually there are no hair-like strings, but they appear to our mind. This is like inherent existence. Inherent existence appears. Now you can be fooled by this appearance, and if you look at a vessel, for instance, and you see hair, you try to remove the hair here. You're fooled by the appearance. But once you realize emptiness, you know it appears to exist inherently, but you're not fooled by it. But a Buddha is someone who doesn't have the appearance of inherent existence. There's no folding, there's no hair, because the impairment has been removed. So Buddha knows this is just an appearance. Okay, so this is an example Acharya Chandrakirti uses. Alright. Similarly, when sentient beings and Buddhas perceive a conventional truth such as a table, the inherent existence of the table appears to sentient beings' awarenesses, whereas what appears to Buddha's omniscient minds is the table's lack of inherent existence. That's pretty clear. Okay. Because Buddhas are free from all afflictive obscurations and thus free from any kind of mistaken appearance. Thus far, I think it still makes sense, or it's still clear. Furthermore, although sentient beings can directly realize the table's lack of inherent existence with their mental consciousness, they cannot experience the table in the same way as Buddhas do. Alright, here it comes. This is a little complicated. When Buddhas observe an object, they see the object's emptiness by way of not seeing the object. Huh? I wasn't going to add that first, because you just leave it out. It's not that difficult. It's not that important, but because we still had time and I wanted the students to use their mind, I just added that little difficulty at the very end. I could have left it out, but it's actually part of the entering into the middle way. Okay. So, for instance, in the auto commentary by Chandrakirti, he specifically explains this. If you look on page 48, at the very end it says response in brackets, true. However, they see by way of not seeing. Right? Acharya Chandrakirti says they see by way of not seeing. Okay. All right. So now I'll just read the very last bit. The latter passage indicates that Buddhas see or perceive the ultimate nature of the 5 aggregates, the 4 elements, everything else, by way of not seeing conventional truth. In other words, they directly realize the aggregate's lack of inherent existence through the vanishing of the appearance of conventional truth. But at the same time, their minds also perceive conventional truth, which our mind can't do. So, basically, they still have a similar experience that we have, perceiving the lack of inherent existence by way of the vanishing of the conventional truth, as it would appear to us ordinarily. That that disappears for them. Similar to our experience, but the mind can simultaneously also know the conventional truth. It can do both. So they have the vanishing of the conventional truth, just perceiving the ultimate truth, but different to our mind that cannot at the same time perceive conventional truth, their mind can. So the question is still, why do the Buddhas perceive conventional truth through the vanishing of the appearances of conventional truth? Why is that? Well, let's go through it. First of all, seeing by way of not seeing is not a contradiction, since what is seen, the emptiness of, for instance, the five aggregates, and what is not seen, the aggregates' conventional truth, are different, right? Seeing by way of not seeing is just saying, when you see the emptiness of the I by way of not seeing the I in that moment, that ordinarily appears to exist inherently. However, this does not mean that Buddhas do not realize conventional truth, as Buddhas in awarenesses non-conceptually realize all ultimate truth through the vanishing of the conventional truth, while simultaneously non-conceptually realizing all conventional truth through the appearance of the conventional truth. So one mind can do both. Only focus on the ultimate truth through the vanishing of the conventional truth, but at the same time also perceive the conventional truth directly, which our mind can't do. Furthermore, this is where it's a little tricky. Lama Tsongkhapa explains that Buddhists perceive conventional truth only from the perspective of sentient beings. What we perceive, the Buddhas perceive as well. Like conventional truth, my reality, your reality, the sum of our realities. The Buddha knows that it appears to us inherently. To the Buddha, nothing appears inherently, but the Buddha knows how it appears to us, because the appearance of inherent existence exists. The inherent existence doesn't exist, but the appearance of it does. Right? The appearance of it exists. So the Buddha knows how things appear to us. The Buddha knows exactly how everything appears, knows my reality, knows your reality. This is why the Buddha is so effective in helping us. Not only does the Buddha know our karma, knows what is best for us, what are our imprints and everything, the Buddha also knows how we see the world and can therefore give teachings that are different for a German or a French person or a Tibetan or a Singaporean person. Right? We see the world slightly differently based on our culture, our upbringing, and of course, as a community, there's some similarity, but on an individual level, we're all unique differently. And so the Buddha knows how everyone sees the world and can give the appropriate instructions. The conventional truth, the Buddha perceives from our perspective, because we're labeling. Labeling is happening in the conceptual mind of sentient beings. A Buddha's omniscient consciousness realizes all conventional truth, but there are no conventional truths that appear exclusively to Buddhas. The conventional truths that appear to a Buddha are those that also appear to sentient beings. Therefore, the appearance of conventional truth to a Buddha's omniscient consciousness is described as other appearances. Shenna in Tibet, not Shendong, not other emptiness, no, other appearances. There's a concept called Shendong, never mind. Other appearances. Since they appear to Buddhas through their appearance to sentient beings. So Lama Tsongkhapa says in the Illumination of the Intent, which is a commentary on Acharya Chandrakirti's entering into the Middle Way. Now, it is not that a Buddha's knowledge of things in their diversity, so the conventional phenomena in their diversity, perceives aggregates and so on, because it is affected by the imprints of ignorance. That's not why the Buddha sees things. It's not affected by ignorance. Nevertheless, a Buddha must perceive the appearances experienced by other beings, whose cognitions are tainted by ignorance. Now here, the very end, some scholars assert that this implies that impure conventional truth, So impure means for ordinary sentient beings, the ordinary appearances we have, they're impure because they're affected by our ignorance, by our mental afflictions. Therefore, in this context, they're called impure, based on everything we perceive being affected by our ignorance. So these, which appear to the tainted minds of ordinary sentient beings, are realized by Buddha through their appearance to those sentient beings. In contrast, pure conventional truth, such as the Buddha's omniscient mind, are realized by Buddha through their appearance to his own mind. So this, I like this distinction, because to say every conventional truth that appears to the Buddha has to appear to sentient beings, that's a little difficult, because the Buddha's mind, the Buddha's qualities, we have no clue of what that really means. We have some coarse perception of it. So I like the second interpretation, saying that when it comes to the impure, everything that appears to us sentient beings, the conventional truth that appear to sentient beings, they appear to the Buddha through what appears to our mind. But they're also pure conventional truth. The ones such as the Buddha's mind, the Buddha's cessation of obstructions, the Buddha's realization of emptiness, that appears to the Buddha through his own realizations. That makes more sense to me. The first interpretation is one interpretation, but I prefer the second one. All right, we're done. I mean, basically, yeah, through Calvin's question, I had the opportunity to go through it. And the part that he didn't ask about is actually self-explanatory. You can read it, and I don't think it will take that much time. So yeah, thank you for that. It gave me the chance to at least finish the text to such a degree that if you read it by yourself, it's easier to understand. Now, I would, of course, this is only what I put together here is a short version just to have some material for a course. If I had used any of the books, 10 days would have not been enough. I would have needed a month and month. But hopefully with this, you have a framework to use as a basis to then read, like I said, Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, for instance, and fill in the details. So that's my hope. This should be a topic. I mean, a lot of people find it difficult, but finding difficult and not studying is just not a solution. It's important to be patient with our own not understanding, which for us is harder because as students in school, that was pretty, we were used to it. But now we're not so used to it. So to be patient and to be okay with not understanding and to not get frustrated with the bits we don't understand, but focusing on what we do understand and build on that. And the beauty of the study we did, the study of philosophy, was it gives you the confidence, it's just a matter of time and effort that you can come to an understanding. Right? If you ask enough questions, if you read enough, you will all understand it. This is not something that is beyond our understanding. It just needs time and effort. And so, beauty, what my hope is, or what I feel so optimistic about is that you are open to the teachings, you have an interest, you're open to all the teachers, you're not doing chobong, you have very qualified teachers in the form of Geshe Dorje Damdo, in the form of Geshe Losang Yenten, and so it's wonderful to see that the Dharma is thriving in Singapore, more than in many other places. So on that note, so thank you again for your interest, for your enthusiasm, and yeah, hope we meet again, maybe here, maybe in Macau. Thank you.
Yeah, before we as Kishimali as a delegation, I just say a few words. So thanks Kishima for coming to Singapore, actually to give us this 9 days of 12 classes of teachings. It's just over 2 months ago, we have a very casual meal without agenda at all. And after which, through our group karma and also our collective merits, actually we are able to receive these teachings. So thank you Kishima and rejoice everybody. So on a personal note also, I think many of us also have heard two truths before through other teachers, but it's true. Personally, I think maybe I can speak for some of you as well, that actually through these 9 days, I think got a bit of nuances from the two truths. Alright, so again, thank you Geshe for teaching us these two truths again. And also very, again, personal also, it's very comforting to hear words of my teacher, one of my main teacher, Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, through you. Actually, you share his knowledge. Actually, that we repeatedly hear it. So this name was repeatedly mentioned because he is really a great teacher, and also Geshe probably agrees to that as well.
Yes, he's amazing. Yeah, amazing.
So last but not least, actually on behalf of everyone, actually we would like to make a request for Geshe to come back next year. So Geshe, please, can you come back to Singapore next year?
Thank you. So of course, one last activity. So was an activity in the beginning that's important. We've done that, and then at the very end. Now it's really at the very end. So very important to use the power of our mind to dedicate all the virtue we've accumulated over the last few days by thinking, well, may this become a cause for all of us to understand, of course, the true truth, to follow the guidance of our great lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Geshe Kelsang, and so forth, so that we're able to reach their level of understanding, to overcome the obstructions, the obscurations to liberation and enlightenment. Of course, not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of every living being. So with this in mind, let's take a moment to dedicate in that way, so that when we recite the words, we focus on exactly that. And then let's recite the prayer together. Thank you very much. Take good care.